of government. Any one of these new millennium methods standing alone may not cause concern. When taken together, however, the cumulative effect is the disenfranchisement of eligible voters in numbers that in some instances silence and in others severely frustrate the voices of the masses. These new millennium laws are akin to, among other things, the disenfranchising poll taxes, literacy tests, grandfather clauses, and other disenfranchisement measures of the past. We are commanded to meet these assaults on the right to vote with battle-tested and proven strategies that can preserve the right to vote from the hands of those who seek to return to the days when only certain Americans could exercise the right to vote without fear. These are not new attacks on the right to vote. Laws have been proposed and enacted that specifically sought to affect voters of color since the late 1800s and the passage of the 15th Amendment. Moreover, the courts have also been involved in endorsing and restricting these types of laws. Uncounted examines this phenomenon through the lenses of history, race, law, and the democratic process. It seeks to educate and create power within communities that are severely and regularly disenfranchised. Surely a way exists that can expand the franchise without sacrificing integrity. What has worked to combat these perennial disenfranchising methods? How do voter ID and other new millennium methods affect voter participation and confidence? Are these new mechanisms similar in effect to Jim Crow-era laws of the past? Consider this. If you could get rid of voters, eligible voters, without violence and within legal means, would you try it? What if the affected voters were predisposed to vote against you, or so you believed? Would you use or propose laws that had this effect? What role could courts play in endorsing or revoking these laws? Enfranchisement-minded grassroots organizers, advocacy groups, and determined voters hold the key to unlocking the prize of democracy, the right to vote. Uncounted does more than identify new millennium methods. It explores methods that take away the right to vote while we sleep. We're sleeping comfortably while the right to vote is suffering debilitating blows in the courts and legislative houses across this nation. This book will address the similarities between the more overt and ferocious methods of affecting access to voting with the contemporary ways that we currently endure. Indeed, it will provide the wake-up call that is needed to move beyond the strangulation of voter access versus voter integrity to methods that provide for unencumbered voter participation. It illuminates these deceptive and conniving methods and wakes us to an eye-opening revelation of the power of the vote and the ongoing efforts to take the power away from the people. It provides a framework for understanding voter suppression, its roots in the founding and evolution of our democracy, our contemporaneous struggle to vote, and what must be done to dismantle this suppressive system. Each chapter will discuss the historical counterpoints to a contemporaneous suppressive tactic, the laws that allow these mechanisms to continue, the impact of the disenfranchising devices with accounts from real voters, and solutions to break the cycle of voter suppression. In Chapter 1, I introduce the historical context of disenfranchising legislation and reveal the striking similarities between the pre-civil rights era methods of violence and intimidation to specifically disenfranchise Black voters and the new millennium methods of disenfranchisement via legislation and litigation. Using my almost 100-year-old grandmother as the framework for this discussion, I will illustrate the real impact of voting laws on people of color. Next, few places have impacted the course of our democratic nation like Selma, Alabama, which served as the pressure point for passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, VRA. The VRA has been lauded as the most effective piece of legislation passed in this country's history. For all of its accomplishments, in 2013, the United States Supreme Court found that one of the most important parts of the act had outlived its usefulness. In Shelby County, Alabama versus Holder, the court found part of the act unconstitutional and removed protections from a majority of the South, just as the Hayes-Tilden Compromise of 1877 had done in post-Reconstruction. In Chapter 2, we walk through the history and need for the VRA, using first-hand accounts of the impact of Jim Crow laws, the liberation that the VRA introduced, and the impact since Shelby. Chapter 3 highlights